can see daylight. We're gonna be okay.
Hey!
I don't think that's daylight.
Just push it! Push it! Push it!
Breaking news. The famous franchise, Toy Story, is being accused for 200 deaths of children worldwide. After weeks of the death coming from families of children aged 3 to 8 years old, a father bravely tells his story of what he saw.
I wish I could give you the classic. This happened to a friend of mine. I honestly, truly do. I could make it a lot less gruesome in my head than it really was. That I could doubt it like the rest of you could even through this happened to me, because even though there were witness, sometimes I'm not quite sure I believe in myself. It's the wills of my son, including my friend of mine's daughter, who was 4 years old that night, that reminded him and me that it did indeed happen. So I save my son from this evil chanting that you keep hearing on that TV, and I don't know what happened. I was like making dinner for myself, and what I hear is some corruption statics that's on the movie. It was supposed to be for Toy Story 3, but so Toy Story 3 is basically takes in like another part of a Toy Story franchise. Is about what's going to happen to them, even though their owner Andy is going to go to college. But this time, however, was different. When it gets to the scene where the fire pit was at, something really changed that scene completely. Like, I don't even know what it is. But what can I do tell is that I don't remember much. Probably my friend of mine do. Well, his daughter name is Kate, so I guess I should just give you a heads up what he been experiencing ever since he took Kate to the movie theater. So, Kitty had just turned 3 a couple weeks ago before the incident. One thing he do love was to take her to theater every Saturday mornings for a kids' movie presentation. It went from old classic like Snow White to recent Pixar movies. It was fun and enjoyable. And that way Katie mingled with other kids with her age who loved the same movies. Well, sometimes my son of mine can do some of that, but at the time Katie was literally obsessed with anything related to Toy Story. We had all 3 movies on DVDs, which she watched originally. Thank God I love these movies too, because you can get sick of watching the same thing at a minimum of 5 times a day. Let me tell you. We also had Woody and Buzz and Jessie dolls too, which she loves to sleep with. She was afraid of trucks by the time when she's turned 2, so I taught her to pull the strings on either Jessie or Woody to scare the bad trucks away in the middle of the night. Honestly, these dolls were a blessing. So when I found out that Toy Story 3 was being shown at the kids' theater, I jumped on occasion. Even though Katie has seen it countless times before, there was nothing like watching on a big screen, and I knew she'd be ecstatic. I invited my friend John to see the movie, and he accepted. The show was supposed to be started at 8 a.m., but it didn't start until 9. It wasn't that bad. Since the kids were having fun together, some parents left frustrated. But I stuck around, as did about a half of a dozen other mothers and one father with their kids. The theater employee apologized and offered us a free candy. All good. Who refuses a candy? I go into the cliches of the stories like this and was saying that the movie started normally. Because, well, it did. The intro was a part Kitty liked the most, where Woody just chased the train and Buzz saves Woody at least a minute. Actually, nothing enough happened for the most of the showing. Once in a while, it would glitched. And where the image would freeze for a second and then fast forward to catch back with the sound. While I noticed it, including John, the kids didn't care as long as they got to see their heroes in jumbo size. Near the end, where things got a little bit of strange. It didn't seem off at first, but was soon found out, as every other family in the theater would. There is a point in the movie where Woody and the toys will end up in a dump after Lotso managed to drag Woody into the dumpster and the garbage truck picks them up. The little piece of planet's aliens gets taken away by one of the trucks in the dump. But then Woody and his friends are carried onto the conveyor belt. The moment they hit the belt, the screen flickered to the sound jam and a constant loop with the toys screaming when they fell. And then we got to look at its well-known blue screen of death with that awful screaming sound going on and on like a broken record. I always found loopy and jumpy that sounds like that comes from the blue screen of death disturbing. Hell, I always thought that scratchy record or CD teeth chattering eerie. Maybe it's always because I used to have a computer that crashed on me every half an hour and kill my files. It made me nervous. But when Jonathan, the father, burst into the mocking laughter, I uttered a nervous laugh too. The kids were confused. But for those who had just had enough knowledge of computers, it was really funny. I have the other kids who work at this theater, and he did quit for another job around the time computers replaced people in the cabins projecting the films. I guess nothing will be replaced. A good old human being. When nobody came to check on us, John got up and left to ask someone to turn that thing off or restart it. Kate didn't seem phased by this and shrugged it off, waiting patiently. She always pretty smart and mature, knowing she could watch it at home anyway. A little boy was crying, and the mother had to leave when the sound became ridiculously loud. It wasn't constant. That's the screaming sounds you see. It lowered to a near whisper. It became loud enough to make my head buzz. At some point, Katie gave me a worried look as she clamps her hands over her ears. Well, and before I made the final decision to leave, however, the screen went to black and an employee returned with John and a flashlight, apologizing to let us know they would resume the movie shortly. Apparently, they have been equipment problems all morning. Shortly after the projector came back to life, the movie resumed to a few minutes prior to the crash. Only to crash at the same point a second time, blue screen of death again. But then John and I were laughing. Don't get me wrong, we only paid for $5 fee for entrance, but this was getting ridiculous. Seriously? John exclaimed. This time, no one had to go to get any employees. The screen flickered to the movie started where it left off, almost immediately with a loud clank coming from the cabins up behind me. It reminded me of a gun as it clicked the safety off, and it couldn't help but look up at the beam of light. Might have been an employee's kicking the machine back in gear for all I knew. As long as it worked, I wasn't going to complain, but come to this point, another mishap and I was gone. Watching it at home was a whole lot less troublesome. But the movie seemed fine to come to this point, except the sound like someone had put a pillow over their speakers to muffle it. Something else was odd though, but I didn't notice that. It wasn't until Lotso betrayed the toys by not pressing the stop button of the belt and let him fall into the incinerator. Or John calls it the fire pit. But apparently though, Lotso did say something else. It says he's supposed to say, "Where's your kid now, Sheriff?" It's just something like this. "See you in hell, Sheriff." Which just seems very odd, which because no toys should ever say hell, even though it's supposed to be a kid's movie. The voices were different, not by a whole lot. Maybe the kids didn't notice it, but I did. I know John did too. Because we exchanged curious glances. They were similar, but Woody, for example, clearly wasn't voiced by Tom Hanks anymore. It's around that time I felt something was really wrong. My stomach clenched painfully, and I felt my heart beat like a drum roll. There was no reason for it. I had no explanation for the voices being different. Only the differences didn't just end there. And if you've seen this movie many times as I have, you know that while the toys eventually give up and accept their fate by holding hands and waiting for their deaths, a light comes on and a giant claw hauls them out of the incinerator or fire pit at the very last seconds. It keeps you on edge for the first time, but once you've seen it, you know better. Except I don't know anymore. The animation was fluid, but by now it wasn't right. I mean, have you ever watched those old 1930s cartoons like Betty Boop, where everything always moves and never stops? A few years later, they figure out it was more natural to have stop animation because that's how we work. We didn't notice it, but we stopped between motions. Grab up a coffee, stop. Bring it into lips, stop. Chug it down, stop. Put it back down, stop. It's subtles, but it made all the differences in an animation when they realized that, and things started looking a whole lot less psychotic. From that moment on, well, the animation was on a big screen, just didn't stop moving, like these old cartoons. There was no stopping it between emotions and actions. Action and motions. They sort of danced around everything in some way or another. But let me tell you, if you thought it looked psychotic with the 30s, hand-drawn animation, computer animation, makes it look twice as disturbing. Well, I never know why this has happened like this. I mean, I never know. It's always been a good part. I thought would be the end of a Toy Story franchise. You know, I thought this would be the end of Toy Story stories. You know, like for real. I beginning to think. I mean, one time, I ever been expecting my head. I've been asking myself, what would happen if the claw didn't show up for the last seconds? And what would the alien toys would do if they didn't rescue Woody and the others? I was beginning, what if there's something different? I never describe it. Like if I see the alternative ending of Toy Story 3, I never know what it actually happened. But long story short, it did. There was none of the dramatic music when like I was used to hearing. In fact, there was no music at all. But only the sounds of fire crackling, but maybe it wasn't just necessary. Imagery was enough. I already felt a lump in my throat. Just watching the animation, I couldn't move. I nailed to my seat. The claw-saving toys never came down. There was no heavenly light before the last-minute rescue. There was no rescue. However, the toys scream and scream and scream in an ear-shattering screech that would ring in my head for days to come and would wake me in the middle of the night. The toys held hands, would shriek. as her plastic melted into the thick flesh-colored goo. I remember Woody's face the most because this is what the screen mainly focused on as they advanced towards the fiery pit in the middle. Black bubbles pop first in his cheeks, and then his gaping mouth opened wider, forcing a wide smile and then a humanly possible. His lips screeching to wrenched length until his whole jaw melted off at the hinge, leaving a long, thick liquid streaks of burning plastic behind. I was reminded of the way cheese strings, when warm and melted, which forced a complete insane bout of laughter out of me. Cheese and plastic. What the frick was I even looking at? The banshees like screaming from Woody escalated with the speaker all around us. It came from everywhere at once. What the hell is this? John screamed. My stomach cramped as despair ripped through me, and I thought I would collapse right there. I couldn't move, glued to my seat. Woody's eyes rolled down his cheeks like they weren't painted on, but were real globes of gelatinous substance which burst like egg yolks, leaving holes in place. Their eyes, all of their eyes, were the only thing acted as real eyes might. Not like the plastic or fabric. Later I realized why. Eyes are the mirror of the soul. Eyes, even if they look painted, they are always real. Always. And so they exploded into liquid state. So did their souls, burning in the fiery pits of hell. It's silly to think that way of a cartoon characters, but that's the only explanation I found for the difference. I'm not sure it makes me feel any better to think that way, actually. It just made me feel worse. Woody's hat had melted over his head and shapen unnaturally with a fabric of clothes caught fire in one burst. It crackled like some demonic laughter, burst into sparks, including a convulsing back, except he didn't go far because his hands were fused with Slinky and Buzz's hands. The screaming was like the sounds of a pure hell, like coming something from a demon. The voice, though wrong, sounded like a human until now. I felt a sharp cramp in my hands because I had been holding into my arms of my seat as though they were my lifeline. In some way, they were. The action kept grounded because part of me feared I ended up in the pit and melt off as well if I didn't get myself summon this reality. Well, most of the footage focus on Woody, but you get the glimpse of the others too. Toys like Buzz, Rex, Jesse. They were exclusively of plastic melted quickly in a disturbing, colorful goo. There was no blood, just plastic molding itself into a bursting into flames. It was horrible and graphic. Maybe it was because you get to know these characters so well that you felt them alive despite the fact they're just toys or cartoon toys. You don't need blood and organs spilled. You just need to see their suffering. So deep you felt it too. I even felt my skin started to prick and burn in response. I shouldn't have gone out sooner. Taking Katie with me to spare her, it was a mistake on my part not to. I regret it for the rest of my life. The screeching turned into wheels. I was able to come out of my trance long enough to realize the sound of a crying and screaming did not come from the speakers anymore, but the people around me, many of them being kids. There was nothing but the sounds of a crackling fire from the pit around us now. Half of the toys were dead. But the children and adults alike, myself included, were the ones screaming and weeping. Buzz's back burst open with the sparks coming out. With a sudden burst of strength, I grabbed Katie in my arms and ran out of the theater. I didn't even look back though. I could now smell the plastic burning. It wasn't just stuck into my nose, it clung into my clothes and skin too. I thought I heard someone vomit and collapse behind me. I'm surprised I didn't. I noticed the father, with his crying son and daughter, had secured past me. Then again, he might have been smarter than me and left before I did. I noticed that John was not behind me, but does that not matter at this point? Then again, he might have been smarter than me before left before I did. The father was yelling at the employee who stood giving tickets. That poor kid didn't seem to get what he was saying. He seemed overwhelmed by the screaming and crying. Soon enough, the small crowd of parents surrounding him, things started to get violent and the kid had to escape. I just stood there, with Kate screaming in my arms, half hearing her still in shock. And I just felt lost. I didn't know what to do or where to go. Should I go home? Join the angry mob of angry parents? And willing children? Go to police? What? My feet move on their own, and I let my instincts take over. The door. I was leaving. It was better for Katie anyway. To keep her away from this place, I felt empty and the smell of burnt plastic seems even stronger as I step outside. When a hand gripped my arm, I jumped and yelled. Yup, it was my father with his child in his arms, sobbing in his shoulder. It turned out that his name was Jeremy. We exchanged phone numbers after he told me he would see to it and get an exemption of what happened. The rest of the day did not go well. I took 2 baths and Kate, but a dead stench wouldn't leave. Eventually, I stopped crying and fell asleep out of a pure exhaustion. As for me, though, even though I was completely off, even I felt like I could sleep too, I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the lifelike eyes of Woody slip down his cheeks and burst, or his wide smile and jaw hanging loose until it's clenched on his lap. Just before my husband came home from work, I got a call from Jeremy. I remember something on my chair as he spoke, and a new set of hot tears streamed down my cheeks. My head hurt and my eyes are burning. I thought they might pop right out too. Jeremy said that the theater's management took the remaining few parents to see to the computer that handled the projection of the movie. Sure enough, they found a virus stood in there which streams a homemade version of the movie. But the streaming led to nowhere. Jeremy's job was to handle computers, so he was able to took long enough for those who couldn't. He tried tracing it back to where the streaming had come from and the virus, but there was no lead to follow. Either a prankster or an employee had to set up the virus from the computer itself and covered his tracks very well. Or something was very, very wrong with this picture. I prefer a rational explanation to something of outer nature. So I opt to believe that it was an employee who has access to the computer either way, other than could corrupt the files with the virus had left behind. There is no evidence of the disturbing footage we watched. It was gone. That was little more than a year ago. Anything related to Toy Story has left my house. My husband had to believe us, but I can tell he's skeptical. He says someone had to animate the thing, and people had to act out the voices. That took a lot of dedication because while the animation went constantly moving, the quality of the image and the characters was as good as the original movies. He says that it was one of a hell of a effort to put it into one time prank. He's right though. I never heard of anything of the sort again. You think it wouldn't have come out of it? I checked, and Jeremy, too. There is no record of anything like it anywhere. Jeremy had even tried to contact Disney and Pixar, but they never returned his calls or emails as expected. The theater's closed now. I think someone sued them over what happened, but all the news mentioned was bankruptcy. It's been a week after the incident. I got an email from John. He decided to stay and record the ending of the movie for evidence. He told me that the final scene showed the toys either melted or still melting, getting engulfed by the flames. And then I cut to Lotso looking down with a wide smile and started to laugh, and then the scene cut to black with a Lotso laughing, echoing. He said that he wished that he could jump into the screen and threw Lotso into the burning pits of fire and slowly watch him burn to death. Even though Lotso was a stuffed bear, and I guess you know what happened if a stuffed bear would interact with flames. To this day, I still get the whiff of burning plastic once in a while when Kate's mom screams at night, suffering from those horrible nightmares about melting toys.